I think we all know the gentrification, destruction of Black communities has become a epidemic around the country. You can look at Oscarville in the state of Georgia. You can look at the history of the interstate highway system. Black communities have continuously been victims of eminent domain and construction companies coming in and destroying what we have spent so long building. Right now, a Louisiana parish is fighting to keep a construction company from building a large grain plant near a residential neighborhood. The Descendants Project, a local Louisiana nonprofit, is helping the residents of St. John's Baptist Parish battle Greenfield Louisiana LLC. Greenfield is a Colorado-based company seeking to construct a large grain silo or grain terminal. The local Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed a decision that the residents could move forward to nullify the zoning ordinance. To help explain this new development, we're joined by Dr. Joy Banner, co-founder of the Descendants Project. Dr. Banner, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about this case and how we got to this point? Because I've worked with many families and many organizations trying to stop these, and it's a David and Goliath type of situation often. How do we get to this place where we're already in federal court trying to stop this grain terminal from being built?
Yeah, well, the reason why we're here in the first place is because 30 years ago, the parish president of St. John the Baptist Parish took a bribe and illegally changed the zoning from residential to industrial. That parish president was sent to federal prison for 5 years, but the zoning stayed on the books for 30 years, and now Greenfield is taking advantage, of those laws. St. John the Baptist Parish, who the lawsuit is against, we're suing the parish to actually have the zoning change off the books, and Greenfield stepped in and intervened and is now, part of that lawsuit. But the good news is that, like you said before, the courts at the district level affirmed that the case could continue. Greenfield stepped in and actually appealed the decision, trying to dismiss the case again. And the appellate court agreed that, again, the case could continue. But really what is very shocking, and, I guess maybe being in Louisiana, maybe it shouldn't be, and the fact that this is Cancer Rally, and we're in the environmental and health crisis that we are, maybe people aren't shocked, but it's just the way that our elected officials, understanding how dangerous this grain terminal is. When we say grain, sometimes people don't have an understanding of how dangerous these facilities are. They have been characterized as more explosive in some cases than dynamite factories, right? And so we would have this huge, massive facility that's sitting right outside of our backyards, right, outside of our doors. And the fact that, no one at our public official level, even at our state legislative level, no one is concerned enough about, the danger, and the fact that this would pump out 130 more tons of pollution into an area that's already called Cancer Alley. We have asthma rates that are twice as high as the states and is twice as high as the countries. But the way that our elected officials, again, have refused to put us on the agenda, we have tried to engage with our legislators, and they've ignored us.
And talk a little bit about why the elected officials have acted in this way, because it seems like this should be a political solution. That you have elected officials, you go there, you ask for a change in the zoning, and then if they don't do it, you vote them out. But we see often that this is not the case. We had a case or a situation here in Atlanta probably a decade ago where I was the lawyer, and we were trying to stop a zoning ordinance, and we found out that these construction companies had been buying people Cadillacs and shoes and vacations and everything else. Talk a little bit about why the political solution has fallen apart.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately because the way that industries work is they engage with our elected officials first. they get the approval, they get whatever relationships, whatever has been promised, they get that worked out first. And then these public officials, instead of doing what's in the best interest of the public, they're instead acting as an arm, an extension of these companies. And so for us, the most shocking, for us even involves our port of South Louisiana. This is bizarre, what we found out. They have actually stepped in. That's the port, which is a board that is appointed by the governor. It's a public serving board. It's a political subdivision. But on paper, essentially, the port has agreed to buy the Greenfield grain terminal, at least on paper, so that Greenfield will get a $209 million tax deal over 30 years. So that money, instead of it going to the schools, instead of it going to, resources, infrastructure that we need, resources for flooding protection, for our senior citizen community, that would be wiped off the books for them. And this is done in full participation and collaboration with our Port of South Louisiana. They've done this with some really suspicious, in my opinion, some very questionable tactics that seem to be in violation of open meeting law. So it's not publicly, available for us to even see. Has been done with little documentation, has been done with little record keeping. It's amazing that, a company could be allowed to get $200 million of taxes essentially wiped off the books. Yet we don't even have a paper trail. We don't even know how the decision was made. So again, it is our elected officials, our leaders being more loyal to these companies and let's be, probably to what they're getting from these companies rather than being concerned about citizens.
You talked a little bit about the environmental and health effects of putting a terminal like this near a historic Black community, because it's not just the terminal being itself. It is the hundreds of 18-wheelers that are going to be coming through that area every day, spewing pollution and diesel fuel. We talk about the processing of grain. If you get a chance, for the viewers, just look at the Lebanon grain terminal when it exploded a few years ago with the force of nearly an atomic bomb. It nearly destroyed that port, because once grain is oxidized, all it needs is an ignition source and pressure being inside of a silo, and you effectively have something the equivalent of the Oklahoma City bomb, which was an ammonium nitrate bomb. In addition, when grain ferments, it leaks dangerous chemicals into the water supply, the groundwater supply. Talk a little bit about the health effects that people are worried about and why it's so important to stop this from being constructed.
Yes, and thank you for for being so informed about the dangers of grain. But yes, like you said, it takes a layer of dust as thin as a sheet of paper to be dangerous enough to explode. There was a grain explosion and fire 2 days ago in Michigan. They explode all the time. And the really frightening part about it is that in a lot of those cases, you can't determine why exactly did these grain terminals explode. So yes, I mean, they explode all the time. Also, just the air that we would be breathing in. So we're breathing in all of the, the fumigants, the fertilizers, all of the chemicals that are being used on the grain. The dust itself contains pieces of metal fragments, which is sometimes the reason why, these grain terminals explode, because, it scrapes against metal and it causes an explosion to happen. So yes, we would be breathing in, things like excrement from animals, from dead insect parts, dead rodent parts. So all of that, again, in Cancer Rally, in region where we have been begging, pleading, with our government officials, with people in charge of protecting us to come in and help us, right? And we have, studies that show over and over again that environmental racism is real, that Black communities, historic Black communities like mine, whose, people are descended from the plantations that still surround us. And in which case, many of these plants are literally on the grounds of plantations. That's the reason why our burial grounds are in danger, including, burial grounds at the Greenfield site. That's why we, are often targeted. So again, we are just pleading, for our elected officials to step in. But even if they don't, we've taken the responsibility as private citizens, which should not have to be our responsibility. These elected officials have the power to do something, and they don't. But the good news is that the work of communities like mine, we actually have an EPA investigation into permitting, including one of Greenfield's permits. So it's an unfortunate situation, but we're going to continue fighting. We have no choice but to fight, and we're in it for the long haul.
How has the federal government been either assisting or have they not been assisting in this? Daniel Blackman's of the EPA for the Southeast region. Have they worked with you to try to determine how to stop this? Have your congressional representatives been responsive? Because we want them to find a solution to this, not in addition to bringing attention to the problem.
No, our legislators, our representatives and senators, unfortunately, have been very disengaged. And, these are Louisiana, predominantly African-American for this region. And it has been really, very disturbing, but more disappointing, I should say, that our elected officials, I mean, we've reached out to some and they've not, engaged with us, or they say they're going to meet and they don't, or they know we've put this story out, put this, the situation out in the media enough, and we are not getting any engagement or any outreach. What happens in Louisiana, as it does in a lot of places, is that it becomes an economic development, or these industries come in and they use jobs, as a reason why they promise us jobs. And they make us think that we can't get jobs or we can't get economic development that doesn't require Black communities and Black people to be sacrificed. This is not a sacrifice zone. And we can attract industries that, have community input. We can go out and we can find, things that work for our community. But we have a very rich parish. But if you look at, the resources, the infrastructure, the problems that we have in our parish, it's a lack of good governance at the state and at the local level. That's why we have the situation that we have.
Well, we're glad we have people on the ground like you bringing attention to this. And I think it's crucial for folks to just think about this. When grain ferments, it turns into alcohol. That's where liquor comes from. If you put fire to liquor, you get an explosion. That is what putting a giant grain silo into a community does. You're putting a literal bomb into the middle of a Black community. Thank you so much, Doctor, for all the work that you're doing and for bringing attention to this. We're going to make sure we follow up on this to make sure the people of that community are protected, and hope we can bring in our federal officials to put some pressure to move this to a less populated zone. If it was a good idea, put it by the rich people and see what they have to say about it. Thank you so much for joining.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.